Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. It's August 26, 2019. Coming to the end of summer, election year in Virginia, and yes, ragweed is in the air. We have a pretty special show tonight. Part of it's education, part of it's information. I wanted to certainly bring you up to date on a couple things that are happening in our area. My first guest is going to be talking about her run for school board. My second guest will be talking about a growing problem in the area, and that is human trafficking. So please stay tuned for the whole show. With that, I'll introduce my first guest, a dear friend of mine, Elaine Tholen, who is the candidate for the Democratic Committee running for the school board here in the Drainesville district. So, Elaine, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
No, and why are you running? Yes, I got to ask people because I just got to know what motivates you.
Yeah. It's a good question. I get that question a lot,
Okay.
Especially when I talk to people in the school district. It's kind of funny. But, I've lived in Drainesville for 25 years.
Okay.
I have two boys who went all the way through, Fairfax County Public Schools. So as a family, we've certainly taken advantage of, everything the school district has to offer. Most recently, I worked for the school district for about 8 years. I'm actually a certified science teacher.
Great.
And worked with a set of principals and the science team to start and then run we called it Get to Green, which was the environmental education and sustainability program for the school district.
Excellent.
And the program grew quickly, and we have about 125 schools now that are registered with our partner, the National Wildlife Federation Eco Schools program. And through that program, I was able to work across almost all of the school district, which was pretty exceptional. Worked in a lot of schools around the county. Worked in the instructional services department. That's where my position was housed. But because we had so many students working on projects like edible gardens, and then putting food into the cafeteria, onto the salad bars.
Oh, wow.
We were working with the food and nutrition department. We had kids doing energy auditing, recycling, building wildlife habitat. So they crossed many of the areas of the facilities department as well. So
Excellent.
I was able to work with all of those departments.
So what do you want to do first? I mean, you've got a broad range, a good base of things, but what's the first thing you want to sort of get moving on?
Yeah, so I really think looking at, and being out and talking to people about what they think about the school board and the school district, it all boils down to communication. And so the very first thing I would get to work on right away after being elected is a really solid communication plan with something that's open and transparent with students, parents, the community. I want to use a variety of electronic platforms and a newsletter, but types of platforms where we can have a back and forth conversation. I want to be very visible in the schools.
Great.
To students, administrators, and parents. I'm fortunate that I have the time that I can really put into this job. And hopefully make that communication much more open and transparent.
So that's pretty important because I had heard, pointing fingers at anyone, some of the prior members or board members didn't want to hear any type of contrarian view. And if it somehow rubbed the institution the wrong way, that was like a bad thing, right? So it's comforting to hear that you're open to.
Yeah, and I can't necessarily talk to the previous board members, but I already do serve on a county board. I serve in the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
And thank you for
board.
doing that.
Absolutely. We'll have that
Clean
position.
water and soil, those are important things.
We need them for sure. But even then, people have differences of opinion on how we should be approaching our environmental issues, and you always have to be open to all sides of the story and listen and get data and information and then try to make the best decision possible.
Yeah, I think all information, regardless, you got to weed out and filter out the things that are probably a little extreme, but For me, people that invite a contrary view, differing opinions, that's only good, right? You can only learn or strengthen your own resolve on something. So very,
Right.
very happy to see that.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks.
What are some of the challenges you're hearing for some of the young folks? And this is kind of leading into my next guest and
Yeah.
segments. I mean, are you hearing, that there's, safety issues in school? Are you hearing that there are some concerns with students? I mean, what are some of those things you're hearing out there?
Things I'm hearing about, certainly people are very concerned about safety, and really looking into, talking to some of our safety experts on, what are the things that we should be looking into doing. The school district has done some things to make our school buildings safer places, but there's a lot of work to do there. So I'm doing a lot of research on that.
Okay.
The other thing I keep hearing about is student stress and anxiety levels. We just ask so much of our young people today, academically and socially, that I feel strongly that we really need to look at what kinds of supports we need to have in place for really, our students, of course, but then the people that support them too. So what kinds of programs do we need for, mindfulness and wellness and anxiety and stress reduction for our students? But then for people that support them, like our teachers and our instructional assistants, what kind of supports do they need, for their own stress levels? But in order to really work with the students, what kinds of tools can we give parents and to help families really address some of these issues? And help these young people, be able to learn the best that they can possibly learn and become, citizens and, help us kind of take care of the whole person.
How's that changed from, let's say, 10, 20 years ago? I mean, what's different today in terms of the stress levels?
So, I keep hearing from people that it's worse. Of course, I saw it with my boys too, and, we had to deal with it. But I think social media is not helping the situation, and our kids have so much more access to social media now than, even my kids did when they went through Fairfax County, and, they're just out of college.
Yeah.
So
Here's a little hint for the folks out there. I took a trip a few years ago to Peru. I disconnected for 3 weeks. It was the best thing I ever did. So maybe people disconnecting, I know it's hard, but taking that device and just stashing it to the side, not a bad thing from time to time.
Yeah, not a bad thing from time to time. And it's always a constant, give and take. Of course, we are trying to prepare our students for working in a technological workplace.
24-hour connection.
Yeah, but how do we prepare them for that workplace of the future, but at the same time give them coping skills to, take care of themselves?
Let me ask you, because it's kind of a personal thing too. The immigrants, English second or third language student, how are they going to be addressed? How are we going to prepare them for the future? Is there something that the county's doing or the district can do? I mean, because you have this inherent example, right? There's a school there that has low scores, so it's perceived as being a bad school, but it just has a higher percentage, right? And so it's like, how do we address that?
Yeah, so scores are tough, when people compare schools like that. But there are so many reasons for you pointed out English as a second language, for example. You would expect scores to be lower if you have a high percentage of children that don't speak English, or have interrupted education, or other reasons for not necessarily performing on the standardized test. I think a couple of things are happening, and this is even statewide, that we're relying on standardized tests a little bit less than we used to measure student success, and looking at other ways to measure whether a student is moving forward in their education. We certainly have good programs to help students to learn English and learn the language, and then be able to perform in the classroom. And I would really like to see those certainly expanded and continued. some of the types of learning, the project-based learning that we're expanding with teachers, where kids learn in more of a hands-on kind of environment and working on authentic projects that are concerned with their community. We've had some conversations in Herndon already, looking at some of the other towns in the county that are getting their students involved in projects right there in the town. So
kids learn in different ways.
Yeah,
right?
so, and that we've seen that to be extremely successful with special education students, our English as second language learners, different age groups.
And that's so important too, especially in a diverse county like ours. I remember, I don't know what the number is now, but it was 120 some different languages spoken in the homes of public school homes.
Yeah,
that's insane. I mean, I can't even name 20. Right. I mean,
so we have an incredibly diverse population,
which is amazing.
And so the way I really want to view that as a positive. How do we keep that view that it's a positive and that we include everyone and work our hardest to meet each student where they are and help them to move forward.
And providing that support group for their families and making it sort of this foundation.
Yeah, and that's why too, a lot of times I talk about community schools, and so, really reaching out to the whole community too, our places of worship, our town councils, our business leaders in the community, surrounding families and businesses to work with the school and, offer some additional programming, additional supports, jobs perhaps for some of these students. When the community really pulls together, the schools are more successful. And
so I'll plagiarize it takes a community.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
I mean,
it takes a community.
It really does. I mean, I just think, and I love that Drainesville, Fairfax County is more the progressive, accepting of new, different, innovative ways of doing things.
Yeah, we've got great programs at Herndon High School, Langley High School, McLean. They all have amazing programs for our students. And meeting the students where they are. Our elementary schools are doing a great job, and our middle schools too, of course.
It's all part of
but there's always more that we can do.
Well, we'll look for lots more from you, and certainly thank you for coming on. What's your website if people want more information?
It's an easy one, ElaineTholen.com.
Get out there, folks, check it out, and we'll be back with our next guest, and trust me, you need to hear this information. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious? It's my ball, Myrtlebeck. You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice. Holy spice. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward.
I'm the awkward silence.
You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here's about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health
at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Thanks for coming back. I wanted to introduce you to my next guest. Susan Young is with an organization called justaskprevention.org. It's to address the still growing issue in our area. And I got to tell you, we've done this before. We've had this program, this topic on before, but the problem's not getting better. It's actually getting a little worse. Human trafficking. Northern Virginia, this region, has a problem. And I wanted you to hear first the impact that this problem has had on families in our area. And I invited our next guest on to tell her story. Susan, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell us your story.
So I've come here today to share a personal story of human trafficking, not only and the impacts to the victims, but to their families as well. A little bit about myself. My name is Susan Young, and I'm the mother of 4 beautiful children. I was born in the suburbs of Northern Virginia. I attended local schools, pursued college, and started my career in fashion. I also met and married my best friend of 20 years. From the outside, my life appeared to be on a normal path. Growing up in the suburbs of Northern Virginia, near our nation's capital, I felt protected by the bubble of our great nation. Little did I know that one cold February day, the life of my family would change forever. My story begins 7 years ago on a sunny August afternoon. My daughter had just turned 15 years old and was celebrating the last few days of summer vacation with her friends at a local movie theater. It all seemed innocent enough, a few teenage girls getting together before the start of high school. At the theater, our daughter met a boy who was close in age and also lived in the area. He was handsome, polite, and seemingly well-mannered. It all appeared innocuous. The boy seemed harmless and well-intentioned, so they exchanged phone numbers as well as Facebook information. Unfortunately, he was not what he appeared to be. Rather than a sweet, innocent guy, he was an MS-13 gang member. His job was to recruit young girls, entice them through friendship, under the cover of being lured into the dark world of human trafficking. Their relationship began with an occasional phone call, transitioning to text message, and eventually an online friendship. Their friendship seemed harmless enough. After all, how much trouble could they get into through Facebook or text messaging? Over the next few weeks, our daughter's mood began to change. She grew distant and pulling back from the family. In what seemed to be overnight, her behavior transitioned from distant to rebellious and eventually deceitful. She started lying and stealing from us. We later learned that she was also lashing out at her childhood friends and distancing herself from previously close relationships. Eventually, her grades began to drop and she started missing classes altogether. To try and help her, we enlisted the help of her counselor to begin coaching her. Unfortunately, she interpreted our advice as trying to dictate her life path, and we as her parents were not happy with who she was. Little did we know that the gang was brainwashing our daughter. They would tell her that we didn't love her and that she was not wanted at home, and that she was a burden to our family. To make matters worse, we later learned that her new friend introduced her to MS-13 gang affiliates at her high school. These affiliates initially befriending her and then bullying her. She reported the bullying to the school, reaching out 22 times to her school's counselor and resource officer with no response. Eventually, the bullying turned into violence. They raped our daughter on school grounds. She was hit over the head and pushed to the ground. She was raped by multiple guys while the others watched and videotaped. When they were finished, they told our daughter if she ever told anyone what would happen, they would share the video with her friends and family. After all, what family could want or love just such a disgraceful daughter as her? Our daughter will tell you that a piece of her died that day, which opened the door to shame and self-hate. Now, I assumed that gang members were a disorganized group of kids who just like to hang out and cause trouble. This is not the case. MS-13 is a well-orchestrated organization with money, resources, and a plan of coercion, deceit, and addiction for purpose. Our home was under constant supervision, again, all without our knowledge. They followed and tracked our every move. They even learned our shopping patterns, when and what time we would leave, and the average length of time we would be gone. My husband and I were at our wits' ends. How could we help our daughter? She was spiraling out of control right before our eyes. We felt helpless. The more we tried to gain control over the situation, the more she fought back. We would ground her, and she would lash out at us and the family. Her brothers began to resent her and us as well. Little did we know that they played their own part in this situation, but they were too scared to speak up. Our only indication that something was terribly wrong was our 3-year-old daughter. She would constantly point to her bedroom window and say, bad man is coming to get me." But being only 3, we thought she was having bad dreams. After all, we had never seen a bad man at the window. Then everything came to a head one early February morning. I received a call at 3:30 in the morning from the boy our daughter had met over the summer. He said, "Mrs. Young, you have to find Courtney. You have to make sure she is safe." I said, "What do you mean? She is upstairs sleeping. Of course she is safe." His reply was, "No, she is not." I felt my stomach sink. "Well, where is she? Do you know where she is?" I asked him. "Yes, she is at a party, and she's drunk and she's high, and she needs your help." Immediately, I started calling her cell phone, and no answer. I called again and again. I tried to track her phone, but the gang had turned off tracking. Panicked, I called every number I could remember, but no one had seen her. I then immediately called police right away. When the police arrived, they knew a slew of information that I did not. They knew who she was hanging out with and what their activities were. Apparently, the police had been watching the situation for quite some time. The boy she was currently with was a 20-year-old sophomore who attended her high school and had a past criminal record. And I knew deep down inside something wasn't right. Courtney would never not come home, and she would always answer my call if she could. As I sat there listening to the officers and answering their questions, memories of my daughter flashed across my mind. It is then that I realized my daughter, my darling baby girl, was living a secret life I knew nothing about. Fear rippled throughout my body. Will I ever see her again? That was a question that no one could answer. "How do I find her?" we asked the officer. His reply was, "You need to wait 24 hours before she is considered a missing person. Then we can start to take the situation seriously." My daughter was in trouble, and her friends said so. I felt helpless and afraid. All I could do was wait the 24 hours while my daughter was going through God knows what before help would come. But what if I couldn't get to her in time? That was not good enough for me. I was going to find my daughter with or without the help of the police. Something deep inside told me that she needed me to find her, and I would not stop until she was safe at home. The following morning, I received more information about the guy she was currently with. I did my own research on the internet, and my worst fears were confirmed. The men that she was currently with were, in fact, known human traffickers in our area. I fell to my knees. My baby girl, my helpless baby girl, was with these monsters. We enlisted the help of a local TV station to put out the word that our daughter was missing and in danger. Finally, a break with the help of one of our daughter's friends, she confirmed where our daughter was. I drove to the address. I sat outside the house wanting to break down the door. I called the police instead. I gave them the information and told them where I was. I was immediately ordered to go to the police station to wait. As I waited for them to return, I later learned that the police officer had found my daughter locked in a closet. When they brought our daughter in for questioning, they treated the situation as if she was a runaway. My daughter was not a runaway. I asked the lead detective for advice, and I was told to send her to school the next day and to pretend as if the whole situation had never happened. "Are you crazy?" was my reply to the officer. I just wanted to help my daughter. The days that were to follow were a nightmare. Everywhere I turned, no one could help. Hospitals, doctors, even our own pediatrician couldn't help. We enlisted the help of several counselors, but no one knew how to help our daughter. One doctor even accused Courtney of lying and making up the entire situation. All I knew was we had to keep our daughter safe. At this point, we did not know the full reach of MS-13 or what they were capable of. We soon learned in the weeks to come what that meant. I awoke Mother's Day morning to a pounding on our front door. "Mrs. Young, come quick." I opened the door to see our neighbor's son standing there. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "He has your daughter. Please come quick." I tried to stop him. I ran down the street, barefoot in my pajamas, chasing after my daughter. I screamed her name the whole time as I ran, but I was too late. She was gone a second time. I spent the next 5 hours driving around trying to find her, but she was nowhere to be found. At the advice of one police officer, he said, "You need to find your daughter and you need to get her somewhere safe before we pull her lifeless body out of a ditch somewhere." After 2 agonizing weeks, our daughter was found. Police had intercepted a transaction where she was being sold to an out-of-state gang member for $2,000. As a mother, my child is priceless, but some gang member decided her worth was $2,000. This enraged me. When they brought our daughter into the police station, they asked me to go and speak with her. When I entered the room where our daughter was being held, I stood back and I gasped. Who was this lifeless girl in front of me? She was a pale shadow of the daughter I had once known. "What happened to you? Where were you?" I couldn't get a coherent sentence out of her. Frustrated and overwhelmed, I yelled, "What happened to you? Where were you?" But the same grumbling noises came from her frail and lifeless body. After we left the police station, we checked her into a local hospital for help. God knows I couldn't help her any longer, and all my husband and I knew was we had to keep her safe. The hard part was trying to figure out how. Our nightmare was about to take another deep and dark turn. The gang was not happy that our daughter did not return home with us, so they started to retaliate against the family. After all, their product was bought and paid for, and they wanted their product. I was followed in public, threatened in public, even held at gunpoint in public. One girl came up to me at a local grocery store and said, "We will have your daughter one way or another. You can count on that." A guy tried to force his way into our house while I was at home with our youngest daughter. When the gang realized that my daughter would not be home for quite some time, they turned their focus on a smaller victim, our 3-year-old daughter. I was told that if they couldn't have my eldest daughter, they would settle for my youngest daughter instead. I was warned not to go into public by myself or with my younger daughter for any reason. My eldest son was threatened and beaten at school to tell where his eldest sister was. It got so bad, we had to have him escorted to class by the school's resource officer. He had to eat lunch in the office every day to make sure he was safe. Our family had been completely and utterly destroyed. No one felt safe, and everyone was on edge. The kids had been traumatized unbeknownst to us by gang members to keep them silent. Even our youngest daughter was a victim to their malicious behavior. Our boys were tortured and raped at gunpoint. Our eldest son tried to deflect the gang's attention on himself rather than his younger brother and sister. My kids have suffered unimaginable pain and abuse at the hands of these monsters. My husband and I wondered, how are we going to rebuild our family? Is it even possible after so much has happened? These are questions I still ask myself every single day. How do you put 4 little souls back together again? I searched to find answers as to how we could heal our family. It turns out that there are very few places that even have the training to help traffic victims, let alone their family. The guilt my husband and I felt was tremendous. How could we not see this? How could we not know this was happening to our own children? I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. How did I miss this? The regrets that we both carry, I doubt will ever go away. My 2 boys still struggle to maintain relationships, trusting individuals, and opening up to anyone. Our youngest daughter is now 11 and still sleeps in our room every single night. We have converted our sitting room into a bedroom so that she can feel normal. It is too traumatizing for her to be away from us, especially at night. She has a fear of loud noises and bright lights and can't participate in the safety drills at school for fear that the bad man might return for her. Our eldest son blames himself for not protecting his younger siblings from the abuse and torture. The anger and the rage that we all feel is still raw 7 years later. like it just happened. We had to learn to trust one another all over again. I fight back my pain each and every day. I force myself to get out of bed, even though I wish I could just stay in and cry. But there is something I realized early on. My husband and I were the ones keeping our family together. We couldn't fall apart, and we couldn't shatter into a million pieces like we wanted to. So we allowed our kids to. We allowed them to break. And when they did, we were there to pick them up. We were there to help them stand when they no longer wanted to. And as they learned to stand and eventually walk, we learned that we were healing as well. We are now at a point where we know that everyone will be okay with time, but time is key. You can't rush it and you can't force it. You take it day by day, sometimes hour by hour. I have a few data points that we were able to get from Courtney after that she was recovered that I feel is pertinent here for you today. Our daughter was trafficked before she went missing. The gang would take her to a local house where 8 to 10 individuals were waiting. She was told that she couldn't leave until she was finished, and when she got home, she was required to pretend as if nothing had happened. After reviewing school records, we discovered that Courtney reached out over 22 times to school administration for help, who took no action to remediate her requests. The traffickers were never held accountable for the trafficking or the abuse to our family. Trafficking laws were not passed in Virginia until 2015. So if our case had gone to court, Courtney would have been charged as a criminal rather than treated as a victim. Since this incident, and through the advisement of local law enforcement, we were able to relocate our family to a safe area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing that. Where are you now in terms of the healing?
Every day is still a struggle. We are now at a point where Courtney she was inpatient residential for 4.5 years to recover from the complex PTSD and trauma that she endured. She is able to function and work. She is attending college part-time. We had to seek help and therapy for all of our children. They are able to function at a normal rate, but every day is hard still.
Sure. Again, thank you for sharing this. What do you want to communicate to the families out there that may not be aware that this is happening? What are some of the things that you learned that looking back maybe were there or you didn't see? I want to help as many people try to understand what's going on here, because this is not an isolated case.
No. I think the most important thing we need to realize is that human trafficking is going on in our communities. Brushing it under the rug and pretending that it's not happening is only going to hurt our children. It isn't going to help our children. So we need to have those difficult discussions with our children. We need to sit them down and we need to say, if someone is approaching you or trying to groom you into human trafficking, these are the warning signs, these are the indicators. And really have that hard discussion with our children. We need, as parents, to know the indicators ourselves. If there is a change in behavior, a change in friends, most of the time parents chalk this up to normal teenage behavior like we did, but that wasn't the case. Our daughter was being trafficked every day after school. So it's learning those indicators, learning what the possible signs are, and then having that hard discussion with our children so that they can be aware.
And just I was trying to recall some of the stats here. The average age of a target is 12 to 15, I believe.
14 to 16, yes.
And it's young girls and also young men.
Yes.
So boys as well are
it's
targeted.
Boys as well. More often than not, we think it's just the girls, but the boys are just as much at risk as the girls.
What has changed? You mentioned some of the laws legislatively that have since 2015. What are some of the next things that need to be done from a legality
The next things that needs to be done is we need to put this in our schools. We have started here in Fairfax County at the Just Ask Prevention to get the curriculum in the FLE programs so that kids have access to this information. Then the governments need to go after the traffickers, but not just the traffickers, they need to go after the Johns. And they need to make harsher penalties for these individuals that are buying these young children. And to make it's the whole supply and demand. So we need to cut off and make harsher penalties for these individuals who are buying these young kids.
And wasn't there an issue as well as the victims are not treated as victims?
Yes.
Help us understand that a little bit, because that blew my mind.
So more often than not, you'll hear the term child prostitute, which we both know a child can't be a prostitute. So we need to get rid of that stigma, and that these kids are being abused, they are being trafficked, and they are being hurt by adults every single day. So we as a society and members of the community need to do away with that stigma that these are child prostitutes. These kids have no idea what is happening to them. They have no idea how to identify what is happening to them. So we need to educate them and to show them what is going on so that they can identify it. We at Just Ask have helped numerous children identify that they're in the grooming phase of being trafficked, but they didn't know how to identify and put to words what was happening to them. Once they came into the training, or their parents came into the training, they could say, yes, this is happening to me, this is what it's called. Then we were able to get ahead of it and prosecute the individuals and save the child from being trafficked.
What sort of resource, you mentioned Just Ask Prevention.
Yes.
What are some of the resources they need, obviously beyond funding, but what are some of the top asks that you would have to the viewing audience if they want to help?
Of course, funding is always the top one, but always it's really getting the community to understand that there is a problem. We need to get into the school systems. We need to get into law enforcement. We need to get into the government. We need to surround this issue as a community so that we can have a greater impact on saving these children. Generations of children are being affected by this issue, and we as adults and parents have the ability to get in front of it and stop it, and that's what we need to do. We need to save our children from this issue. It's everyone from doctors, hospitals, lawmakers. This is a community issue, and we need to surround it as a community.
Are there, what are some of the hurdles to that the folks listening and watching can maybe help mobilize around? What are some of the roadblocks that potentially you're facing, or some of the hurdles that are still out there for you?
The main roadblock, I would say, is that getting people to admit that there is a problem.
Really?
One of the most common things that I get when I speak to different individuals is, well, it's not happening to me, and I don't know anyone that it's happened to, so it's not happening. That is the greatest hurdle that I see, and of course funding from the government and other entities to keep us going. But it's really trying to get the schools and the community to realize that it's here in our community.
It's here in our community, and I was reading that it happens frequently in malls.
Yes.
So tell us about that a little bit in terms of how everyday things can seem to be everyday, but in reality there's potentially something going on.
So human trafficking happens, as they say, in plain sight.
Right.
You have these girls or boys who are going to a store or mall, or in our case a movie theater, with a group of friends, and someone will come up and befriend them. This can be a middle-aged woman, this could be a child their own age. Anyone can be a trafficker. So they will approach these young individuals, they will gain their trust, they will try to befriend them, they will get contact information from them, and then that's when the grooming process starts. They gain their trust, they get them to divulge information. We all have insecurities. They learn these children's insecurities, what makes them, and their vulnerabilities, what makes them weak as a person. what their insecurities are, and then the traffickers use that against the child to get them to do what they want.
How do they target these kids? I mean, generally, teenagers aren't necessarily alone. They're with groups of kids. So, how does that happen?
So we all have vulnerabilities, right? Even us as adults, except I'm not going to tell you what my vulnerability is because I'm not going to share that. But you see the rise of social media. Children are quick to divulge any type of information, especially if they're angry at their parents or any type of vulnerability or insecurity. So they willingly share that on social media or with anyone. And that's how the traffickers gain access to our young children.
So they make the contact and communicate,
yes,
wow.
use their weakness against them.
Okay.
Yes.
What are some of the other lessons learned from this?
For me as a parent, it was to trust my own instincts. Several times during our situation, I had red flags that would pop up inside me. I would ask Courtney, I was like, is something wrong? This doesn't feel right to me. She would always say, Mom, just trust me, even though it went against my better judgment as a parent. So I would ask parents and other individuals to trust your inside. Trust, if those red flags pop up, don't push it aside. Listen to that, because more often than not. So you felt
and you had those warning signs.
We had the red flags and the warning signs, but every time we would ask her, she would say, it's okay. Trust me, Mom, just trust me. And hindsight being 20/20, I would go back and do many things different again.
Your instincts as a mom are honed over many generations, right? So
yes.
Moms, trust your instincts is the message.
Yes.
It's a great message.
Yes.
Where are you in terms of, we talked about your daughter, your sons, but collectively, you and your husband, are you all getting the support you feel you need? I mean, do you have the community support in that sense?
Initially, at first, we did not. A lot of people didn't understand the situation. They didn't understand what had happened to our family. My husband and I noticed right away that we started to play the blame game, and that wasn't going to work out either. But the community was split 50-50. We had support of half of our friends, and half of our friends and community members we didn't. And I would attribute that to they didn't understand what was going on in the situation.
Well, we'll talk about how we can educate more people in our next segment. Folks, please come back to our final segment. I really wanted to get this information out to you, and I think this is a problem we need to deal with quickly. So please come back to our final segment.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. Already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. I'm scared of. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here with my very special guest. I want to talk a little bit about the Just Ask Prevention organization. And I'm just looking through the site here, and there are some very painful statistics here. It is the second largest criminal enterprise in the world.
Yes, yes.
How is it that people don't, I have to admit, I did not know this.
I think it goes back to when our situation occurred, my only knowledge of human trafficking was that it happened in third world countries and taken from the movie Taken. Other than that, I had no knowledge of human trafficking. I had no idea that it was happening in my community. I had no idea that it was in our country. I had no knowledge or information to gain from.
There's another stat here. I think we referenced it before, and just to clarify it, the average age of a child that is exploited is 12 to 15 years old.
Yes.
In the U.S.
Yes.
It's younger in other countries.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Every 30 seconds, a child or teen is sold into slavery.
Yes. And that is happening here in the U.S. And NCMEC just put out an estimate that 1 in every 6 children who goes missing is in fact a human trafficking victim.
They're not runaways.
They're not runaways.
And they're not criminals.
No, as the police perceived our daughter to be. And that simply came from a lack of knowledge. And this is why I share our family story, because I want to break those barriers. I want to let our community, the nation, the world to know that these children are victims. And the fact that Courtney would have been treated in court as a criminal, she would have been arrested and put to jail for prostitution, rather than treated like the victim that she was. It outrages me. Now they have passed a law in 2015 where she would be treated as a victim right now, but back then she would not.
So let's explain that a little bit, because the laws prior to 2015 didn't have a way to delineate what was criminal activity by a minor versus the protecting language of the law protecting the child.
Yes.
That has changed.
That has changed in 2015, yes.
Wow.
But we as a family still can't go back and prosecute those individuals because it was before 2015.
And again, the premise, and I hope I get this right, it's because a child can't enter into that decision on its own.
Yes.
By definition, a child is a child.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They cannot enter that into agreement on their own.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. Gosh. More than 100,000 children are exploited annually here in the U.S. alone.
Yes. And let's think about that. Those are our children. These are the next generation that's coming right behind us. And they are having to deal with these issues and to deal with PTSD and anxiety and depression. And even from what I know my own children have gone through, and this is one of the reasons why I speak out as well, is yes, you have the victims, which is just as important, but more often than not, you find that the siblings are affected by this issue. Our children were abused to make sure that the situation was never found out by the parents. And so you have potential other victims that are not coming forward and are not being treated for the abuse that they're going through.
It really does affect the network
Yes.
of the family.
Yes.
Friends. Victims come from all communities across the U.S. This is not limited to a segment.
No.
It hits all communities.
Yes, this is not a rich or a poor. This hits every socioeconomic class. It does. And more often you will find 40% of traffickers will say that they in fact prefer girls who come from upper to upper middle class. Reasons being these girls are not street smart and they are easy to manipulate because they don't have the street smarts.
Wow.
So it really is, you can't classify it as a rich or a poor, it's just children. It's just children.
I'm reading these items in context. This one is probably the most disturbing because the number of cases continue to increase every year.
Yes. Yes.
This problem's not getting better.
No. And like you stated before, human trafficking is the second largest criminal prize in the world. And the DOJ estimates by the year 2021 that it could surpass the drugs and the arms trade. And that should show the world that it is not getting better. It's not going to get better until we stand up and say enough is enough and protect our children.
Wow. So let me make sure people absorb this. The product is the child.
Yes.
So as a dealer, I sell my drug and I have to go get new product.
Yes. But a child can be sold over and over again.
Wow.
And that's what's sad. They're using our children over and over again. A young girl can be, unfortunately, I hate to use the word used, 20 to 30 times a day, where if you use drugs, there's just one hit.
I don't know how to make that more of an impact for people at this point. I mean, you were talking about a cycle that has to be broken. First of all, it can't start, but once it does, I mean, this is why it'll continue to grow, unfortunately,
Yes.
because it's a renewable product.
Yes.
At that point.
And we at Just Ask have seen the impact of education and prevention. And that's why our main area of focus is education and prevention in the communities and in the schools. We have seen firsthand how these tools are able to bring down those numbers and make an impact in our community. And that's why, others will focus on victim rehabilitation, and we focus on education and prevention so that we can start to get ahead of this issue.
So in that, and by the way, I'm just going through the website, and folks at home, if you do, please visit justaskprevention.org, and you'll see those very chilling statistics that I've been reading here, along with some of the prevention and actions to follow up on. Let's talk a little bit about more, again, I think the awareness is where we'll find at least more impact.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get more people aware of what's happening here?
We're on Facebook, Twitter, social media. You can go and like and share our information. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we have a Tip Tuesday and Thursday. You can take that information, and even if you just share it on your news feed, your friends, your family are going to see that, then they're going to share it to their friends and family. And that's really how we're going to infiltrate this problem, is sharing and gaining the public knowledge.
Let's talk about a little bit more about the actual support.
Mm-hmm.
What's out there for families that wake up and discover? I mean, where do they go today? What do they do today?
They can always call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to put in place certain protocols for family, because there are very few resources for families out there. We have systems in place for victims that is getting much better, and I'm very proud that that is happening. but there are very few resources for parents and families and even siblings as well. I have started a support group within the community about a year ago. It's a parent coalition to really bring resources to parents, because it's really unlike any other subject that's out there. And really, until you go through it, you can't understand how it impacts you as a person, as a mother, as a parent, how it impacts your child. And that's something really hard to wrap your head around. So I've gotten together with other survivor parents. We help one another, we share information, we share resources with each other. We learn how we're navigating the criminal justice system, what has worked, what hasn't worked, different types of therapies, if there's a new facility perhaps out there for a victim or family member, a new type of treatment available. We really try to share that with each other to keep that going, and I hope to one day spread this across every city in the United States so that parents and even other family members, because this not only affected my husband and I, it affected every member of our family, because we are a whole unit. And to go through something like this as a family and as a unit had a profound impact on us. And even cousins, uncles, everybody needed to know how to heal, and even how to interact with Courtney, because they realized she didn't interact with everybody the same way. So I've really tried to bring that awareness to the community and to be that helpful resource to other members of the community as well.
How's the family?
We take it day by day. We have our good and bad days. More often than not, we try to make them positive, but we understand that when our kids and children have a bad day, we need to allow them to do that as well.
Well, I can tell you that coming on and talking about this, and I met you when you talked about this at another session, I think that's very brave.
Thank you.
You are inspiring, and I think you will continue to motivate people.
Thank you.
And empower them to make a change here, because this is a problem that, quite frankly, turns my stomach.
Yes.
And I know it's not easy to discuss, but I can tell you, this program, this community that I know of, will know about this issue, and will make it an issue that gets changed eventually. So I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Folks, thanks for sticking with us. Please visit justaskprevention.org. Please get involved.